The morning of my wedding, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Drake Hotel's penthouse suite, watching Chicago wake up 30 floors below. The lake stretched endlessly eastward, its surface catching the October sun like scattered diamonds. Behind me, my groomsmen laughed over mimosas, their easy camaraderie filling the room with warmth I could observe but never quite feel. I adjusted my cufflinks. Platinum, a gift from the firm after I'd won the Morrison case, and wondered if Elizabeth was looking at the same view from her suite down the hall. My name is Marcus Chin. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a senior partner at Brennan, Clark & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. By every external measure, I had made it. The corner office, the seven-figure settlements, the respect of judges who'd once terrified me as a young prosecutor. But as I watched my reflection overlap with the city skyline, I saw what I always saw. The outsider looking in, the boy who'd learned early that love was something you earned through achievement, not something freely given. The hotel suite buzzed with the controlled chaos of a wedding morning. My best man, James, was telling the story of how we'd met at Northwestern Law, how I'd out-argued him in mock trial despite being the only first year in the competition. The other groomsmen laughed, clapping me on the shoulder with the casual affection of brotherhood. I smiled, played my part, but my hand kept returning to my jacket pocket where a worn photo lived. Not a photo of Elizabeth, my bride-to-be, but of my sister Sarah at her college graduation, her arm reluctantly around my shoulders, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Marcus, you good?" James asked, handing me a glass of champagne. "You've got that look again, the one you get before closing arguments." I accepted the glass, letting the bubbles tickle my throat. Just thinking about the seating arrangements, making sure the Brennan table isn't too close to the Morrison table. You know how lawyers are about territory. He laughed, but his eyes stayed concerned. James was one of the few who knew pieces of my story. Late-night study sessions had a way of breaking down walls. He knew about the Thanksgivings I'd spent volunteering at shelters instead of with family, about the graduation ceremonies where I'd scanned the crowd for faces that never came. But even he didn't know everything. Some stories were too heavy to share, even with those who cared enough to listen. My phone buzzed. A text from my adoptive mother, Linda. "Running late. Traffic on 294. Save us seats." Running late. The story of my life with the Millers. Always something more important, always traffic or work or Sarah's recitals or David's football games. 30 years of being the afterthought, the obligation fulfilled but never celebrated. I typed back, "No problem. Your table is at the front." Number 3. The wedding planner knocked, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Chan, we're ready for you downstairs. Your family is starting to arrive." My family. The word sat uneasily in my mouth, like a suit that never quite fit despite expensive tailoring. Downstairs, the Millers would be taking their seats, checking their phones, making small talk with my colleagues. They'd smile for the photographers, play their parts as the proud parents of the successful lawyer. But I had always known, that their pride was performative, a social obligation rather than genuine emotion. The ballroom was everything Elizabeth had dreamed of. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across white tablecloths, and orchids from her favorite florist created an ethereal garden in the middle of downtown Chicago. 200 guests filled the space with anticipation and expensive perfume. I took my position at the altar, James beside me, and watched the processional begin. First came Elizabeth's cousins, then my sister Sarah in her bridesmaid dress. She moved with the practiced grace of someone used to being watched, her beauty the kind that stopped conversations and started whispers. Her fiancé, Ryan Fitzgerald, sat in the third row, his Brooks Brothers suit impeccable, his smile sharp as a blade. I'd never liked Ryan, Something about him reminded me of the prosecutors I'd faced who confused cruelty with strength. But Sarah was 28 and convinced she was in love. Who was I to judge? I'd spent my whole life watching from the periphery of her happiness. Then Elizabeth appeared, and for a moment, everything else faded. She was radiant in her dress, her father beaming beside her. This was what I'd worked for. Someone who chose me, who saw me not as an obligation but as a partner. As she walked toward me, I felt something I rarely allowed myself. Hope. Maybe this would be different. Maybe creating my own family would finally fill the void the Millers had left. But even as I took Elizabeth's hand, even as the officiant began the ceremony, I couldn't stop myself from glancing at the family section. Linda was there now, overdressed as always, checking her phone. Robert, my adoptive father, sat stiffly, probably calculating how many billable hours this was costing him. Sarah stood with the other bridesmaids, beautiful and distant as a star. And in the back row, almost hidden, sat the one person whose presence made my chest tight, Grandpa Joe. He wasn't really my grandfather. He was Robert's father, which made him nothing to me by blood and everything to me by choice. While the rest of the Millers had treated me like a house guest who'd overstayed his welcome, Joe had treated me like a grandson. He'd taught me to fish at Lake Geneva, attended my mock trial competitions when no one else could make it, and sent me handwritten letters during law school when everyone else preferred the distance of emails. Joe caught my eye and winked, that same conspiratorial wink he'd given me when I was 7, and he'd snuck me extra dessert after Linda had declared dinner over. At 92, he was friendlier than the man who'd taught me to throw a curveball, but his eyes were still sharp, still kind. He was the only Miller who'd ever made me feel like I belonged. The ceremony proceeded with rehearsed precision. Elizabeth and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, hers poetic and flowing, mine structured like a closing argument, building to an emotional crescendo. The guests dabbed at tears. The photographers captured every moment. It was perfect in the way that expensive things often are, flawless on the surface, with any imperfections hidden beneath layers of planning and polish. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and I kissed Elizabeth as the room erupted in applause. We turned to face our guests as Mr. and Mrs. Chun, and I felt it again, that sensation of playing a role, of wearing a life that didn't quite fit. But I pushed it down, the way I'd learned to push down every inconvenient emotion. This was my day, our day. Nothing would ruin it. The cocktail hour passed in a blur of congratulations and champagne. I shook hands with senior partners, exchanged pleasantries with Elizabeth's extended family, and accepted compliments on the venue with practiced grace. Through it all, I kept one eye on my family's table. Linda was holding court, telling anyone who'd listen about Sarah's upcoming engagement party. Robert was deep in conversation with another lawyer, probably turning my wedding into a networking opportunity. And Sarah was at the bar with Ryan, her body language tense in a way that made my protective instincts flare. I'd been protecting Sarah since we were children, even when she didn't want it, even when it earned me nothing but resentment. When Bobby Morrison had pulled her hair in 3rd grade, I'd given him a bloody nose and earned a week's suspension. When her high school boyfriend had cheated on her, I'd spent hours holding her while she cried, only to be pushed away when she took him back. I was always the fixer, the protector, the one who cared too much about a family that cared too little about me. "Beautiful ceremony," a voice said beside me. I turned to find Grandpa Joe, leaning heavily on his cane but smiling. "You did good, kid. Elizabeth's a keeper." "Thanks, Grandpa." The word came easily with him, the only family title that had ever felt earned rather than assigned. "I'm glad you could make it." His expression shifted, becoming serious in a way that made my stomach clench. "Marcus, there's something I need to talk to you about. Not now, this is your day, but soon." There are things about your past, about why you came to us. It's time you knew the truth. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted from the bar. Sarah's voice, sharp with anger. Ryan's, louder, slurred with too much whiskey. Then the sound that changed everything. The crack of flesh against flesh, followed by Sarah's cry of pain. The room fell silent. 200 guests turned toward the bar where Sarah stood, hand pressed to her face, blood seeping between her fingers. Ryan swayed beside her, his fist still clenched, his face twisted with the kind of rage that comes from wounded pride. "You embarrass me in front of these people?" he snarled, apparently forgetting or not caring about his audience. "You think you're too good for me? You're nothing without me, you." I moved before my brain caught up with my body. 30 feet crossed in seconds, years of suppressed rage propelling me forward. But as I approached, Ryan turned, saw me coming, and laughed. "Oh, here comes the lawyer," he sneered, alcohol making him bold. "What are you going to do, Marcus? Sue me? We both know you won't touch me. Not here, not at your precious wedding. You've spent your whole life trying to fit in with these people. You won't risk it for her. You never have." He was right, partially. The Marcus who'd graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, who'd built a reputation on controlling his emotions and channeling them into legal victories, that Marcus would have called security, would have handled this with words and writs. But Ryan had made a crucial mistake. He'd assumed that the man in the expensive suit was all I was. He'd assumed that years of education and success had erased the boy who'd grown up differently, who'd learned different lessons before the Millers had tried to civilize me. "Marcus, don't," Sarah whispered through her fingers, blood now dripping onto her bridesmaid dress. "It's fine. I'm fine. Please, just listen to your sister," Ryan said, reaching for Sarah's arm with the casual ownership of an abuser. "This is between us. Family business. But then again, you wouldn't understand that, would you? You're not really family. Just the charity case they took in. The stray they never quite house-trained." The words hit their mark, they always did. But this time, instead of swallowing the hurt, I let it fuel me. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, saw not just the blood and the fear, but the years of making excuses, the careful makeup that had hidden other bruises, the way she flinched when Ryan moved too quickly. I saw myself at 7, at 12, at 16, always on the outside, always watching her get the love and protection I craved while she threw it away on men who hurt her. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice carrying the kind of calm that precedes violence. "I'm not really family, which means I don't have to play by family rules." Ryan's sneer faltered. Something in my tone, in the way I'd shifted my stance, triggered long-dormant instincts in him. He stepped back, but not fast enough. People would say later that they'd never seen me move like that. Elizabeth would tell friends that it was like watching a different person emerge from her husband's skin. The lawyers present would debate whether my actions constituted self-defense or assault. But in that moment, none of that mattered. My fist connected with Ryan's solar plexus with the precision of someone who'd learned to fight before he'd learned to read. As he doubled over, gasping, my knee came up to meet his descending face. The crunch of his nose breaking was audible throughout the silent ballroom. He hit the ground hard, blood pooling on the imported marble, his Brooks Brothers suit ruined. But I wasn't done. Couldn't be done. Because this wasn't just about Sarah, wasn't just about Ryan. This was about every birthday party where I'd sat at the edge, every family photo I'd been cropped out of, every time Linda had introduced Sarah as her daughter and me as Marcus, who lives with us. This was about 30 years of being good enough to fix their problems but never good enough to truly be one of them. I knelt beside Ryan, gripping his collar, pulling his bloodied face close to mine. "You think you know me?" I whispered, quiet enough that only he could hear. You think that suit and law degree are all I am? Let me tell you something about charity cases, about strays. We survive things you can't imagine. We learn lessons you'll never need. And we protect what's ours with methods you won't see coming. His eyes were wide with fear now, the bravado gone. You're crazy, he gasped through broken teeth. You're fucking crazy. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. You just threw away your career for my sister, I finished. The one thing you got right is that I've spent my whole life trying to fit in. But you know what? I'm done trying. And you? You're done with Sarah. You're going to leave this hotel, leave this city, and never contact her again. Because if you do, I leaned closer, letting him see the truth in my eyes. I'll stop pretending to be civilized. Security had arrived by then, hotel staff hovering uncertainly. I stood, straightening my jacket, blood, not mine, on my cuffs. The ballroom was frozen, 200 guests staring at me like I'd transformed into something unrecognizable, which I supposed I had. Someone should call him an ambulance, I said conversationally, my lawyer voice returning. And Sarah needs medical attention. I believe her nose is broken. The spell broke. People moved, whispered, acted. Elizabeth approached cautiously, her wedding dress a white flag in a war zone. Marcus? Are you? What just happened? I looked at her. My beautiful, sheltered bride who'd fallen in love with the successful lawyer, not the damaged boy beneath, and felt something shift. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. This isn't how I wanted today to go. But even as chaos swirled around us, even as paramedics arrived and statements were given, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Authentic. For the first time since I'd put on my first suit, argued my first case, tried to become someone worthy of the Miller's love, I felt like myself. Marcus. Grandpa Joe's voice cut through the noise. He stood near the family table, that manila envelope in his weathered hands. His expression was unreadable. I think it's time. Linda was crying. Not for Sarah, I noted, but for the embarrassment. Robert was already on his phone, probably calling his lawyer friends. Sarah sat with the paramedics, staring at me with an expression I couldn't decode. But Joe looked proud, like he'd been waiting 30 years to see exactly this. Time for what? I asked, though part of me already knew. Had always known, maybe, that there were secrets buried beneath the Millers' perfect suburban life. Truths that explained why they'd taken in a damaged 5-year-old boy but never quite let him become their son. Time you learned why we really brought you home, Joe said, his voice carrying across the stunned ballroom. Time you learned about your father, your real father, and why the Millers have been afraid of you since the day you arrived. The wedding photographer, still on autopilot, captured the moment. Me in my blood-spattered tux, Elizabeth in her designer dress, Sarah with her broken nose, and Joe holding secrets that would shatter 30 years of carefully constructed lies. It would never make the album, but it was the only honest photo taken that day. I walked toward Joe, each step feeling like shedding skin. Behind me, I left the life I'd built. The corner office, the 7-figure settlements, the desperate attempts to earn love through achievement. Ahead waited truth, whatever it might cost. Tell me, I said simply, and finally, after 3 decades of wondering why I was never quite enough, Grandpa Joe did. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it contained more than just paper. Joe led me to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the chaos of paramedics and gossiping guests. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. From age or emotion, I couldn't tell. Your father's name was Michael Volkov, he began, pulling out a faded photograph. The man in the picture looked like me, or rather, I looked like him. Same sharp cheekbones, same dark eyes that seemed to see too much. but where I'd learned to hide my intensity behind legal briefs and tailored suits, his was naked, dangerous. He ran the Eastern Territory for the Bratva, the Russian mob. The word should have shocked me, but instead, they settled into place like missing puzzle pieces. The way I'd always known how to fight, even before anyone taught me. The way violence felt not learned but remembered, inherited. The way the Millers had always watched me like I might explode, even when I was trying so hard to be good. Your mother was Maria Chun, Joe continued, showing me another photo. She was beautiful, delicate, nothing like the man beside her. A prosecutor. She was building a case against your father's organization when they met. Classic story, hunter and hunted. Forbidden love. Except in their case, it was real. I stared at the photos, seeing myself in both faces. The warrior and the scholar. The predator and the protector. No wonder I'd never fit into the Millers' neat suburban life. I was a contradiction from conception. They tried to run, Joe said, his voice heavy with old sorrow. Your father was willing to give up everything, the organization, the power, the money. But the Bratva doesn't accept resignations. They found your parents when you were 4. The fire was ruled an accident, but we knew better. The only reason you survived was because you were staying with a neighbor that night. The fire. Flashes of memory I'd always dismissed as nightmares suddenly sharpened into focus. Smoke. Screaming. A woman's voice singing a lullaby in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. My mother, I realized. My real mother, singing me to sleep in Russian. How did I end up with you? I asked, though I was beginning to piece it together. Robert was the prosecutor who took over your mother's cases, Joe explained. He knew about you, knew what your father had been. The state was going to put you in foster care. But Robert saw an opportunity. Take in the orphan boy, earn points with the voters. He was planning his run for district attorney. Of course, I wasn't a son to Robert Miller. I was a campaign strategy, a living, breathing proof of his compassion. Take in the dangerous man's child, civilize him, show the voters that Robert Miller could reform anyone. Except you can't reform blood. You can only teach it to hide. But Linda was pregnant with Sarah, Joe interrupted. She agreed because Robert promised it would be temporary, just until the election. But then you stayed, and stayed. And the longer you were there, the more afraid they became. You had your father's eyes, you see, his stillness. They kept waiting for the violence to surface. So they kept me at arm's length, I said, understanding flooding through me. Never quite family, because family would mean accepting what I might become. Joe nodded sadly. They thought if they gave you just enough education, structure, rules, but not too much love, they could control what you were. Keep the wolf fed enough not to hunt, but never so comfortable it forgot it was a wolf. I laughed, bitter and short. And Sarah? Did she know? No. None of the children knew. But Linda and Robert. Every time you excelled, every time you protected Sarah, every time you showed that fierce loyalty, they saw your father. Saw what he'd been willing to burn down for love. Terrified them. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, though I suspected I knew. The wedding brawl had confirmed their worst fears. The carefully controlled lawyer had vanished, and in his place stood Michael Volkov's son. Because I'm 92 years old, Joe said simply. Because I watched them dim your light for 30 years, and I'm tired of being complicit. Because that boy out there, bleeding on marble, he's not the first man you'll want to hurt for touching what you love. And you deserve to know why that instinct runs so deep. He pulled out more papers. Legal documents. Bank statements. Letters in Cyrillic I couldn't read but somehow felt in my bones. Your father left you something, Joe said. Robert knows about it. Has known all along. $3 million in offshore accounts waiting for you to claim it. And connections. Names. People who remember Michael Volkov's son. Robert was supposed to tell you when you turned 18, but he was afraid. Afraid you'd choose that life over this one. $3 million. Not a fortune by Chicago law firm standards, but enough. Enough to stop trying so hard. Enough to stop auditioning for a family that would never truly accept me. Enough to be who I was instead of who they needed me to be. There's more, Joe said, and I could tell this was the hardest part for him. Your father had a brother, Dmitri. He's been watching you all these years, making sure you were safe. He owns a restaurant in Brighton Beach. He sent letters, birthday cards, all returned by Robert. He wants to meet you, wants to know his brother's son. An uncle. Family that might actually want me, not just tolerate me. The thought was dizzying. Marcus. Elizabeth's voice was soft, uncertain. She stood a few feet away, her wedding dress now just expensive fabric instead of a symbol of new beginnings. The police want to talk to you. About Ryan. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the fear she was trying to hide. Not fear of the police or the ruined wedding, but fear of me, of what she'd seen me become, or maybe of what I'd always been. I'll be right there, I said. She nodded and retreated, relief flickering across her face. She's scared of me now, I observed. They all are, Joe said gently. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked around the ballroom. At the Millers, huddled together, a family unit I'd never truly been part of. At Sarah, holding ice to her nose, staring at me with something between gratitude and horror. At Elizabeth, talking to the police, probably already calculating whether our prenup covered assault charges. At the blood on the marble, marking the spot where I'd stopped pretending. Ryan's not pressing charges, Joe added. Too many witnesses saw him hit Sarah first. And he's more afraid of you than he is angry. You put the fear of God in him. Or the fear of Volkov, which might be worse. I should feel bad, I said. I ruined my own wedding, traumatized guests, showed everyone exactly what the Millers always feared I was. But I don't. For the first time in my life, I did what felt right instead of what looked right. And it felt like coming home. Joe smiled, the expression sad and proud in equal measure. Your mother would have been proud. She was fierce too in her way. Stood up to men who terrified seasoned cops. And your father, he would have done exactly what you did. Family first. Always. Family. But which family? The Millers who'd raised me at arm's length? Or the blood family I'd never known existed? The successful life I'd built through discipline and denial? Or the authentic life that apparently came with offshore accounts and Brighton Beach connections? I need to think, I said. Take your time, Joe replied, pressing the envelope into my hands. But not too much time. I'm old, and there are more truths to tell. About your parents. About why they really died. About who's been protecting you all these years. When you're ready, come see me. Alone. He walked away then, leaving me holding 30 years of secrets. Around me, the wedding reception tried to resurrect itself. The band played something upbeat and inappropriate. Guests whispered behind hands and champagne flutes. Elizabeth spoke earnestly to the police, her maid of honor holding her train like a lady in waiting. I walked to the bar, abandoned now, still splattered with Ryan's blood, and poured myself a vodka. The first sip burned, familiar in a way whiskey had never been. Genetic memory, maybe, or just the universe's twisted sense of humor. That was quite a show. Linda's voice was ice-cold disapproval. She stood rigid in her mother-of-the-bride dress, careful not to get too close. 30 years of giving you everything, And this is how you repay us? Violence? Embarrassment? Everything. I turned to face her, saw her flinch at whatever she read in my eyes. You gave me room and board, education, rules. You never gave me the one thing that mattered. We gave you a family. No, I cut her off. You gave me a role, the reformed charity case, the dangerous boy made safe, the success story you could point to at cocktail parties. Look what we did for that poor orphan. Aren't we generous? Her face flushed. That's not fair. We raised you. You housed me. There's a difference. Every birthday when Sarah got a party and I got a card. Every Christmas when she sat by the tree and I sat by the door. Every family vacation I wasn't invited on because someone needs to watch the house. You raised Sarah. You managed me. You don't understand what we risked taking you in, she hissed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Your father was a killer, criminal. We never knew if you'd inherited his violence? Finished. Is that what you want to say? That you were afraid I'd turn out like him? She didn't answer, but her silence was confession enough. Here's the thing, Linda, I said, downing the rest of the vodka. You were so afraid of me becoming my father, you never let me be your son. So congratulations. You created exactly what you feared. A man with no real family, no real home, and nothing left to lose. Marcus, that's Mr. Chun to you. The formal distance felt appropriate, final. Thank you for the food and shelter. I'll have my things moved out of storage. The wedding is paid for, so enjoy the reception. Consider it a farewell gift. I left her standing there, mouth open, words failing the woman who'd always had something cutting to say. Sarah intercepted me near the door, her nose already swelling despite the ice. Where are you going? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Away. To figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be someone else. I never said thank you, she said quietly. For today. For all the times before. I know I wasn't. I know we weren't. You were a kid, I said. It wasn't your job to make me feel included. It was theirs. She surprised me by hugging me then, quick and fierce. I'm sorry, she whispered, for all of it. You deserved better. So did you, I said, pulling back to look at her face. No more men like Ryan. Promise me. I promise. She smiled through tears. Will I see you again? Maybe. When I figure out who I'm supposed to be. You're my brother, she said simply. That's who you're supposed to be. That's who you've always been. Even when we didn't act like it. It was the first time in 30 years she'd called me that without prompting, without performance. It almost made me stay. Almost. But Elizabeth was walking toward us, determination replacing fear on her face, and I knew what came next. The gentle letdown, the this isn't working, the careful extraction of our lives from each other. I could fight it, try to salvage something from the wreckage. The old Marcus would have argued his case, presented evidence of their compatibility, negotiated terms. But I wasn't the old Marcus anymore. Hadn't been since my fist connected with Ryan's face and I'd felt my father's blood sing. You don't have to say it, I told Elizabeth when she reached us. I know. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. I fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. The controlled lawyer. The safe choice. But that's not who you are, is it? No, I admitted. It's not. It never was. I'm sorry I let you believe otherwise. She nodded, tears threatening her makeup. What happens now? Now you enjoy the reception you planned so perfectly. Dance with your father. Let your friends comfort you about your dramatic wedding. In a few months, when people ask, tell them we grew apart. It's true enough. And you, I thought about the envelope in my pocket, about an uncle in Brighton Beach who'd been waiting 30 years to meet me, about offshore accounts and buried truths and the freedom that comes from stopping the performance. I'm going to find out. I left then, walking out of my own wedding reception in a blood-stained tux. The October air was sharp with the promise of winter. I hailed a cab, not sure where I was going until the words came out. Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. The formal wear, the blood, the wild energy I could no longer contain, and nodded like he'd seen stranger things. Maybe he had. As Chicago blurred past the windows, I pulled out the photo of my parents. Michael and Maria, the criminal and the prosecutor, the wolf and the lamb. They died for love, Joe had said. Died trying to escape what they were for what they wanted to be. But maybe that had been their mistake. Maybe you couldn't escape what you were. Maybe you could only embrace it, control it, choose how to express it. I'd spent 30 years trying to be a miller, trying to earn love by denying my nature. What if I'd been fighting the wrong battle? My phone buzzed with texts. Elizabeth, Sarah, James, even Linda. I turned it off, let the silence fill the cab. For the first time since I was 5 years old, I had no one to report to, no one to impress, no role to play, just the blood in my veins and the truth in my pocket and the possibility that somewhere in Brighton Beach, someone was waiting who'd look at me and see not a project or a problem, but family. The city lights gave way to highway darkness. Behind me, the life I'd built crumbled like a prosecutor's case with a contaminated evidence chain. Ahead, the unknown stretched out like an opening argument I hadn't prepared for. But that was okay. I'd been preparing for this my whole life. I just hadn't known it until a man hit my sister and the wolf inside finally showed its teeth. Grandpa Joe was right. It was time. Time to stop being Marcus Chun, the reformed success story. Time to find out who Michael Volkov's son was supposed to be. The cab rolled on through the night, carrying me away from everything I'd built and toward everything I'd buried. And for the first time in 30 years, I wasn't afraid of what I'd find. I was afraid of how right it would feel. The drive to Brighton Beach took 3 hours in traffic. 3 hours to shed a lifetime of careful construction. By the time we reached Brooklyn, I'd loosened my tie, rolled up my blood-stained sleeves, and let 30 years of perfect posture slide into something more natural, more dangerous. The restaurant Joe had mentioned, Dimitri's, sat on a corner of Brighton Beach Avenue, its neon sign flickering between English and Cyrillic. Even at 8 in the evening, the place was packed, steam clouding the windows, the sound of Russian conversation and laughter spilling onto the street. I paid the cabbie and stood on the sidewalk, a man in a ruined tuxedo about to walk into his past, or his future. I wasn't sure which anymore. The hostess, blonde, sharp-eyed, with the kind of beauty that came with steel underneath, took one look at me and her professional smile faltered. She said something rapid in Russian to a passing waiter, who disappeared into the back. "You are Michael's son," she said. Not a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "He is waiting, always waiting. Come." She led me through the restaurant, past tables of families eating borscht and pelmeni, past men who looked at me with recognition I didn't understand. The back room was quieter, more private. A man sat alone at a table set for two, and when he looked up, I saw my father's face aged 30 years. Dmitry Volkov was what I would become if I lived hard enough. Same sharp bones, same dark eyes, but scarred by choices I hadn't made yet. He stood when he saw me, and I realized he was crying. "Misha," he said, using a name no one had called me since I was 4. "My brother's boy. Finally." He embraced me before I could react, and the smell of him, cigarettes and cologne and something indefinably familiar. Unlocked memories I'd buried. Uncle Dima, who'd thrown me in the air and called me Little Wolf, who'd argued with my father in the kitchen while my mother tried to make peace, who'd disappeared one day and never came back. You remember, he said, pulling back to study my face. Pieces, I admitted. Fragments. You used to bring me chocolate. Swiss. Your mother said it would rot your teeth, but you were my only nephew. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Eat. We have 30 years to catch up on. A waiter appeared with vodka and zakouski, pickles, herring, black bread. Dmitri poured 2 shots, raised his glass. To your parents, he said. May their memory be a blessing and a curse. We drank. The vodka was nothing like the watered-down stuff at the hotel. This burned clean like truth. Tell me, I said. Everything. Joe gave me pieces, but I need to know it all. Dmitri lit a cigarette, offered me one. I'd never smoked in my life, but tonight wasn't about who I'd been. I accepted, let him light it, tried not to cough at the first inhale. Your father was the best of us, he began. Smart, ruthless when necessary, but with a code. The Bratva isn't like the movies, all violence and gold chains. It's business, territory, protection. Your father ran the East Side like a corporation. Fair taxes, reliable protection, no unnecessary bloodshed. Until my mother, until Maria, he smiled sadly. She came after him hard. Wiretaps, informants, RICO charges. She was brilliant, fearless. Your father was supposed to neutralize her, but he fell in love instead. Worse, she fell in love back. You know what it's like in our world to love the enemy? It's not Romeo and Juliet. It's treason. On both sides. He poured another round. We drank. The restaurant noise faded to white static. They tried to run, Dmitri continued. Your father came to me, asked for help. I told him he was crazy. You don't leave the Bratva. You die in it or you die trying to leave it. But he had you by then. Little Misha with your mother's smile and your father's eyes. He said he wanted you to have choices. So you helped them? I tried. Got them new identities, clean money. A house in Maine where no one would look. They lasted 6 months. Then someone we never found out who recognized your mother at a grocery store. Made a call. Collected a bounty. The fire. The fire. He crushed out his cigarette with unnecessary force. I was in Miami when it happened. By the time I got back, you were already with the Millers. The prosecutor who'd helped kill my brother was raising his son. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But you let them? What choice did I have? Storm the suburbs? Take you by force? Start a war that would have ended with more bodies? Your father wanted you to have choices. The Millers could give you that. I could only give you what killed him. We sat in silence. Around us, the restaurant lived its life. Families laughing, couples arguing. The mundane beauty of people who weren't carrying generational trauma in their DNA. But you watched, I said. It wasn't a question. Every school play, every graduation, every mock trial. Do you know how proud your father would have been? His son, the lawyer, using words instead of fists, building instead of breaking. Until tonight, his expression sharpened. What happened tonight? I told him. About the wedding. About Ryan. About the moment I'd stopped pretending to be civilized. He listened without interrupting, nodding at certain parts like he was hearing a familiar story. The blood always tells, he said when I finished. You can dress it up, educate it, teach it to say please and thank you. But when someone threatens what's yours, the wolf shows its teeth. Is that what I am? A wolf. You're your father's son. That means you have the capacity for great violence and great love, often at the same time. The question is what you'll do with it. I don't know, I admitted. I've spent so long trying to be what the Millers wanted. Now I don't know what I want. Then let me make you an offer. He leaned forward, all business now. Come work with me. Not the illegal stuff, I'm mostly legitimate these days. Real estate, restaurants, import, export. But I could use a lawyer who understands both sides of the law. You want me to be your consigliere? I want my nephew to know his family, to understand where he comes from, to have the choices your father died trying to give you. The waiter returned with food I hadn't ordered. Beef stroganoff, Olivier salad, dishes that tasted like genetic memory. I ate while I thought, surprised by my hunger. What about the Millers? I asked. What about them? They had 30 years to make you family. They chose fear instead. You owe them nothing. He was right. I knew he was right. But Sarah's face kept floating through my mind. Her quick, fierce hug. The first time she'd called me brother and meant it. I have a sister, I said. No, you have a girl who lived in the same house. There's a difference. She called me brother today, after everything. When she had every reason to be afraid like the rest of them, she called me brother. Dmitri studied me. Your father was the same, loyal to people who didn't deserve it. It got him killed. Maybe, or maybe it made him human. In our world, those are often the same thing. We finished eating. Dmitri introduced me to the staff, all of whom seemed to have been waiting years to meet Michael's boy. They spoke to me in rapid Russian, disappointed when I couldn't respond. Another thing the Millers had taken from me, my mother tongue. You'll learn, Dmitri assured me, if you stay. It was past midnight when I finally asked the question that had been burning since Joe handed me the envelope. Who killed them? Really? Dimitri's face went dark. You want the truth? Your mother's boss, District Attorney Morrison. He found out she'd flipped, was feeding your father information about the investigation. Couldn't have that kind of scandal, so he made a deal with the Italians. They did the job, made it look like Bratva retaliation. Morrison. The name hit me like cold water. David Morrison? Current Senator Morrison? The same. Rode his tough-on-crime reputation all the way to Washington. Built his career on your parents' ashes. I thought about all the times I'd seen Morrison at legal functions. The way he'd glad-handed me, praised my work, never knowing he was shaking hands with the son of the people he'd murdered. Or maybe he did know. Maybe that was part of the sick joke. You want revenge, Dmitri said. It wasn't a question. I want justice. In our world, those are often the same thing too. He gave me a phone, pre-programmed with numbers. A set of keys to an apartment in Brighton Beach. The passwords to the offshore accounts my father had left. $3 million of blood money, waiting to be claimed. Take your time, he said as we parted. The offer stands. A week, a month, a year. Whenever you're ready, you have a place here. I walked out of Dimitri's into the Brooklyn night, a different man than the one who'd walked in. Or maybe the same man, finally honest about it. The bloody tuxedo drew stares on the subway, but I didn't care. I was beyond caring what strangers thought. The apartment Dmitri had given me keys to was small but clean, furnished with masculine simplicity. It smelled like air freshener and old secrets. I showered off the wedding, the blood, the last residue of Marcus Chun, the perfect lawyer. When I looked in the mirror, Michael Volkov's son looked back. I slept like the dead and woke to a dozen missed calls. Elizabeth, Sarah, the Millers, the managing partners at my firm, even a few reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the wedding brawl. I ignored them all, made coffee with the ancient percolator, and sat at the window watching Brighton Beach wake up. The phone Dimitri had given me rang. Unknown number. Hello, Marcus. Joe's voice, thin with age and worry. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Where are you? Safe, I said. With family. A pause. You found Dimitri. He was waiting for me, like you said. Listen carefully, Joe said, his voice dropping. Robert knows you have the information. He's panicking, making calls. You need to be careful. Of Robert? He's a corporate lawyer who hasn't thrown a punch since prep school. Not Robert. The people he's calling. Morrison has connections, resources. If he finds out you know the truth about your parents, then what? He'll kill me too? The son of the people he murdered. Yes, Joe said simply. That's exactly what he'll do. You're not playing in the legal world anymore, Marcus. These people don't file motions. They file obituaries. I thought about Morrison. His political career built on being tough on organized crime. The irony that he'd used organized crime to eliminate the threat to his reputation. The bigger irony that he'd created a worse threat, me. Where does Robert keep his files? I asked. Marcus, no. Whatever you're thinking. The old files. From when he was a prosecutor. Where are they? A long pause. Storage unit in Skokie. But Marcus, you can't just... I'm not going to just anything, I said. But if Morrison comes for me, I want ammunition that doesn't involve breaking his nose at a wedding. This isn't a court case. You can't win this with words. Watch me. I hung up, made another call. A number from the phone's contacts labeled simply Alexei. Dang. This is Michael's son. I need you to teach me something. What? Everything. Alexei turned out to be ex-Spetsnaz, built like a brick warehouse with hands that could crush walnuts or perform surgery, depending on the need. He ran a gym in Sheepshead Bay that looked like a front because it was one. Behind the legitimate business of training fighters was the illegitimate business of training soldiers. Your uncle says you're soft, he said when I arrived. 30 years of American comfort. We'll see. What followed was 6 hours of education in violence. Not the angry, explosive kind I'd shown at the wedding, but the cold, technical kind. Where to hit to disable. Where to hit to damage. Where to hit to kill. By the end, I was bruised, bloody, and more myself than I'd been in decades. You have good instincts, Alexei admitted. Buried under lawyer fat, but there. Your father would be proud. You knew him. Everyone knew Michael. He was what we all wanted to be. Smart, feared, respected, until love made him stupid. Is that what you think? That love made him weak? I think love made him make choices. Whether they were weak or strong depends on your perspective. I showered in the gym's locker room, changed into clothes Dimitri had left in the apartment. Jeans, black t-shirt, leather jacket, the uniform of a different life. In the mirror, the lawyer was gone entirely. What remained was something older, more honest. Sarah called while I was driving a borrowed car toward Skokie. I almost didn't answer, but the wolf protects its pack, even when the pack doesn't claim it. Marcus? Jesus, where are you? Mom's having a breakdown. Dad's talking about having you committed. Elizabeth filed for annulment. I'm fine, I said. How's your nose? Broken, but healing. That's not. Marcus, what's happening? This isn't you. Yes, I said. It is. It always has been. I just got very good at pretending otherwise. I don't understand. I know, and I can't explain it right now. But Sarah, stay away from Morrison. Senator Morrison? Why would I? Just trust me. If he contacts you, if he shows up anywhere near you, call me immediately. Marcus, you're scaring me. Good. Be scared. Be smart. And Sarah, thank you for calling me brother. It mattered. I hung up before she could respond. The storage unit was exactly where Joe had said, a climate-controlled facility that smelled like secrets and mothballs. Robert's unit was padlocked, but Alexei had taught me about more than violence. Inside were bankers' boxes dating back 40 years. Robert Miller's career in careful chronological order. I found what I was looking for in a box marked 1995 to 1996, the year my parents died. The year Robert suddenly dropped out of the DA race, citing family obligations. The file was thin but damning. Photos of the fire scene. Witness statements that didn't add up. A memo in Robert's handwriting. M. claims V. was cooperating. No evidence found. Italian connection suspected but unprovable. Closed case. And at the bottom, a handwritten note. Morrison says to drop it. Family placement secured. Campaign contribution received. They'd sold me. Sold their silence about my parents' murder for a campaign contribution and a boost to Robert's career. 30 years of playing the generous foster parents, and it had all started with blood money. I photographed everything, sent copies to 3 different cloud servers and Dimitri's email. Then I sat in the storage unit, surrounded by the carefully catalogued life of the man who'd pretended to be my father, and laughed. It came out broken, a little unhinged. The sound of a man discovering the joke had always been on him. My phone rang. Elizabeth. What? Are you okay? You sound like my world just exploded? Accurate. Marcus, I'm worried about you. This isn't normal. The violence, the disappearing. Nothing about my life has been normal, I said. I just stopped pretending it was. Did you file the annulment? Yes. Irreconcilable differences. It should be clean. Good. You deserve better than what I would have given you. I deserve the man I fell in love with. That man never existed. I'm sorry. So what now? You just disappear? Throw away your career, your life. My career was built on being someone I'm not. My life was a performance. I'm done acting. This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown. I'm having a breakthrough, I corrected. For the first time in 30 years, I know exactly who I am and what I need to do. Which is family business. I hung up, left the storage unit, and drove back to Brooklyn. The sun was setting over the city, painting everything gold and red. Blood and money, the twin currencies of my inheritance. Dimitri was waiting at the restaurant, along with several men I recognized from the night before. They looked at me differently now, not as Michael's son but as something evolving, becoming. You've been busy, Dimitri said. I showed him the photos, watched his face darken with each revelation. Morrison, he said finally, we always suspected, but proof. Is proof enough? In court? No. These are 30-year-old notes, circumstantial at best. But in our court, he smiled all teeth. Different rules of evidence. I don't want him dead, I said. Dead is easy. Dead is mercy. I want him destroyed. I want him to lose everything he built on my parents' bodies. I want him to know why. Ah, Dimitri said approvingly. You're definitely your father's son. He loved the long game too. We spent the next hours planning. Not violence, that would come later if necessary, but something worse. The systematic destruction of a public life. Morrison had secrets beyond my parents. Every politician did. We just had to find them, expose them, let his own ambition eat him alive. But first, Dimitri said, you need to handle the Millers. They're panicking, making noise, drawing attention we don't need. He was right. I'd run from the wedding, from the confrontation, but some things needed finishing. The wolf might hunt alone, but it always returned to settle accounts with the pack that cast it out. "I'll go tomorrow," I said. "We'll go," Dmitri corrected. "You're not alone anymore, Misha. You have family. Real family. We protect our own." That night, I slept in my father's bed. Dmitri had kept his apartment exactly as it had been, a shrine to the brother he'd lost. The walls were covered with photos. My parents' wedding, my first birthday, the three of us at a beach I didn't remember, evidence of a love that had burned too bright to survive. I dreamed of fire, of my mother singing lullabies in Russian while smoke filled the room, of my father's voice, calm even at the end, telling me to be strong, to remember, to survive. I woke with tears on my face and rage in my blood. Morrison had taken everything from me before I was old enough to fight back. The Millers had profited from the loss, treated me like a pet they'd rescued from the pound. Even Elizabeth had loved the mask, not the man. But now I knew who I was, what I was, the son of Michael Volkov and Maria Chin, the product of love and violence, law and crime, predator and protector. The wolf who'd been raised by sheep and taught to hate its own howl. No more. Tomorrow I would face the Millers. I would show them exactly what they'd harbored all these years. And then I would turn my attention to Morrison, to the man who'd built his career on my parents' graves. The blood always tells, Dmitri had said. Time to find out just how much truth was in that. The Miller's house looked exactly the same as it had for 30 years. Perfect lawn, perfect garden, perfect facade hiding imperfect truths. I stood on the sidewalk, Dmitri beside me, two other men waiting in the car. Not for protection, I didn't need it here, but for witness. For wait. Ready? Dmitri asked. 30 years ready. Linda answered the door. Her face went white when she saw me, whiter still when she noticed Dmitri. She knew who he was. Of course she did. She'd spent 3 decades afraid of this exact moment. "Marcus," she said, trying for stern but achieving scared. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." "No," I said simply. "You haven't. You've been worried about scandal, about what the neighbors will say, about whether I've finally become what you always feared. But worried about me? Never. That's not." She stopped, looking at Dmitri again. "You can't bring them here. This is a respectable neighborhood." "Them?" I laughed. "You mean my family? My real family?" "We're your family," Robert said, appearing behind Linda. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, the weight of secrets finally showing. "We raised you. You housed me," I corrected. "Like a bomb you were afraid might go off. Well, congratulations. I'm finally exploding." I pushed past them into the house. The same furniture, the same photos on the walls, none including me after age 10. The same suffocating respectability that had nearly choked the life out of me. Sarah was in the living room, her face still bruised but healing. She stood when she saw me, uncertain. "It's okay," I told her. "I'm not here to hurt anyone, just to collect what's mine and say what needs saying." "Marcus, please," Linda said. "Let's discuss this like civilized people." "Civilized?" I turned on her. "Like when you took blood money to keep quiet about my parents' murder. Like when you spent 30 years making me feel like a charity case while living off Morrison's payments." Robert's face went gray. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Storage unit in Skokie. Box marked 1995 to 1996. Your handwriting. Morrison says to drop it. Family placement secured. Campaign contribution received." The silence was complete. Even Sarah looked shocked. "You knew?" she whispered. "You knew his parents were murdered and you never..." It was complicated, Robert started. It was simple. I cut him off. Morrison needed the investigation buried. You needed money for your campaign. I was the price you agreed on. A living, breathing cover-up you could trot out at campaign events. Look how compassionate Robert Miller is, taking in the orphaned boy. We gave you everything, Linda said desperately. Education, opportunities. You gave me crumbs and expected gratitude. You gave me a roof while denying me a home. You gave me your name while making sure I never forgot it wasn't really mine. Dmitri spoke for the first time. The boy's father left instructions. Provision for his education. Money you were supposed to give him at 18. Where is it? Robert couldn't meet his eyes. Invested. For his own good. He wasn't ready. You stole from me, I said, understanding flooding through. The college fund you claimed was from your generosity? That was my father's money. The car for graduation. My money. Every gift you gave me was bought with blood money you were supposed to just hand over. You want the money? Robert said, desperate now. Fine. I'll transfer it today. Every penny plus interest. Just don't do this. Don't destroy everything we built. Everything you built? I laughed, and it was an ugly sound. Your entire career is built on my parents' corpses. Your house, your reputation, your perfect family. All of it fertilized with their ashes. That's enough, Linda snapped, fear converting to anger. We don't owe you anything. We took you in when no one else would. We could have left you in foster care, let you become another statistic. Instead, we gave you a chance at a real life. A real life. I stepped closer, watched her step back. You gave me a costume and demanded I be grateful for it. You gave me rules and boundaries and constant reminders that I wasn't really yours. Do you know what that does to a child? To grow up in a house where love is conditional on being someone you're not. We were protecting you, Robert said, from your father's world, from what you could become. No, you were protecting yourselves, from the guilt, from the truth, from the possibility that Michael Volkov's son might want justice for what was done to him. So what now? Linda asked. You've said your piece. You've brought your friends here. What do you want? I want what was always mine, I said. The money. All of it. Every penny my father left plus 30 years of interest. I want the truth. Public acknowledgement of what you knew and when. And I want you to know that Sarah is under my protection now. You failed her as much as you failed me, letting men like Ryan near her. That ends now. You can't just... Robert started. I can. I cut him off. I have documents, photos, financial records showing Morrison's payments to you over the years. Would you like to see how that plays in the media? Respected lawyer took bribes to cover up murder, stole from orphan. Has a nice ring to it. They looked at each other, 30 years of shared secrets passing between them. Finally, Robert nodded. Fine. The money's yours. We'll transfer it today. All of it. Just leave us alone after this. Let us have some peace. Peace. I shook my head. You don't get peace. You get to live with what you've done. Every day you get to remember that you sold a child for political gain. That's your sentence. That and knowing that I'm out there watching. Always watching. And if you ever hurt Sarah again, if you ever let anyone hurt her, I'll stop being civilized. Permanently. I turned to Sarah. You can come with me if you want. Away from this. Away from them. You deserve better too. She looked between me and her parents, torn. I need time. To think. To process all of this. Take all the time you need, I said. You have my number. When you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here. I headed for the door, Dmitri beside me. At the threshold, I turned back one last time. You were right about one thing, I told them. I am my father's son. But you were wrong about what that means. He wasn't just violence. He was love so fierce it couldn't be contained. Loyalty so deep it couldn't be bought. You tried to breed that out of me, make me safe and small and grateful. You failed. We left them standing in their perfect house with their perfect lies shattered around them. In the car, Dmitri squeezed my shoulder. You did well, he said. Your father would be proud. Would he? He wanted you to have choices. Now you do. What you choose to do with them. That's what makes you his son. That night, I sat in my father's apartment, my apartment now, and made a list. Morrison was the head of the snake, but he had help. Co-conspirators. People who'd profited from my parents' death. The Millers were just the beginning. My phone rang. Sarah. I've been thinking, she said without preamble, about everything. About all the times you tried to protect me and I pushed you away. About how they made me complicit in keeping you at arm's length. You were a child. I was. But I'm not now. And I'm done being their perfect daughter if it means losing my brother. She paused. Can I ask you something? Anything. Are you really connected to the Russian mob now? It's complicated, I said. My uncle runs legitimate businesses. But yes, some of the people around him are less legitimate. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with having family who actually wants me around, who sees me as more than an obligation or an opportunity. The rest, I'll figure it out as I go. And Morrison? What are you going to do about him? I looked at the murder board I'd started on the wall. Photos, documents, connections mapped in red string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except this conspiracy was real, and I was its sole survivor. Justice, I said. One way or another. Be careful, she said. Please. I just got my brother back. I don't want to lose him again. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, planning. Morrison thought he was safe. 30 years of distance, layers of protection, a Senate seat that made him untouchable by normal means. But I wasn't normal. Never had been. I was the son of Michael Volkov and Maria Chun, raised by wolves in sheep's clothing, trained in both law and lawlessness. I was the consequence he'd never calculated on, the bill come due with 3 decades of interest. He'd taken my parents, stolen my childhood, turned me into an orphan raised by people who feared me. Time to return the favor. Time to show Senator David Morrison what it meant to be afraid. Time to make him understand that some debts can only be paid in blood. The hunt was about to begin, and the wolf had finally learned how to use its teeth. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're like me, someone who spent years trying to earn love that was never truly offered, you know these aren't just stories. They're mirrors of our deepest wounds and greatest triumphs. Subscribe if these stories resonate with your journey. Hit that notification bell. Think of it as our regular meetup, where we share truths that others might not understand. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? What would you have done in my shoes? Your words matter to me, and they matter to everyone here who's walked this lonely path. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another story. Until then, remember, family isn't always blood, and sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who you truly are. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.